Welcome to Audiobook Select. Today we're reading Woods Runner by Gary Paulsen. Chapter 7. He had been running for 40 hours now. Just as he left Draper's Crossing, he passed a cornfield that the attackers tried to burn. Some ears of corn had been roasted. Hunger took him, like a wolf, and he grabbed a dozen ears and jamming them in his clothing. He ate as he walked, letting the sweet corn juice slide down his throat and into his stomach. The hunger was so intense that eating the corn made his jaws ache. The food made his body demand water. He hadn't taken time to find a well or where one was. When he came to a small creek, he stopped to drink. Their water was muddy where the creek crossed the trail, so he moved into the thick underbrush 20 yards upstream to where the creek ran clear. He knelt to put his mouth to the water, and this act saved his life. His lips no sooner touched the water than he heard men's voices. It was a native tongue, and they were loud and laughing. There were two of them. Had they come upon Samuel, they surely would have taken or killed him. Samuel kept his head near the ground. Those small holes in the brush, he could see them from the waist down. There were leather leggings and high moccasins, and each carried a musket in one hand. He could see the butts hanging down at their sides, and either a coopstick or a killing lance in the other. Both of the men had fresh scalps hanging on the shafts they carried. For the first time in his life, Samuel wanted to kill a man. The overwhelming rage that had begun to feel while his mother's small footprints, as she had been savagely jerked along the trail, was like a hot knife in his brain. If there had only been one, he would have done it, but he carried no tomahawk. All he had was a skinning knife, and his rifle fired only one shot. After that, the one he didn't shoot would turn on him before the other could reload. With only a knife to defend himself, he'd have almost no chance. So he waited until they were out of sight, then staying low and moving slowly, he went back to the trail. Why had the men come back? Whatever the reason, two men alone would not backtrack too far into potential hostile country. If there were any kind of force after them, they would want to keep moving. So Samuel thought, maybe I'm getting close. He picked up the pace to a jog, but stayed well to the side of the trail on the edge of the thicker undergrowth, in 'cause he ran into others. And again, this move saved his life. Clearings left by old beaver ponds were scattered through the forest. Some were small, an acre or two, others were 30 or 40 acres. A large clearing popped up in front of Samuel now. It was late afternoon, almost evening, and the sun slanted from the west behind him into the clearing. It was another stroke of luck. The clearing had been turned into a large encampment, filled with Indians, some British soldiers in red uniforms, nearly a quarter of a mile away. Freight wagons hooked up to horses. Samuel slid into the underbrush. He crawled farther back to where he couldn't be seen. Unfortunately, he couldn't see either, and he squatted in the thick foliage and tried to remember what he'd seen. 3 wagons ready to go out, 10 or 15 soldiers, including these officers on horses, 3 horses, and then 10 or 15 Indians. He shook his head. No, not so many soldiers. 7 or 8, and fewer Indians. 8 or 9. One large fire at the center of the clearing, one small one closer to the wagons, a group of people huddled there, the captives. There hadn't been time to see them clearly, and they were too far for him to see if his mother and father were in the group. In a rope pen near the wagons were 1 or 2 horses, 3 or 4 oxen, maybe a milk cow. There was also a spit set up over the larger fire with some kind of big animal cooking, which meant they were going to be here for some time, perhaps the night. He settled slowly back on his haunches, careful not to move the brush around him. He had caught up to them. There was a chance his mother and father were there in that group of captives. He still had no plan to rescue them. Everything he'd done was just to catch up, see if they were still alive. Could they be here? He hadn't come across their bodies on the trail, and they were captives by the fire. For the moment, that was enough. The plan would come later. It would be dark soon. There was still no moon. Now he was astonished that it had only been 40 or so hours since he returned from the hunt. His whole life, everything in it and around it, was different now, torn and gutted and forever changed from all it had been, and it would never be the same. It would be dark soon, and in the dark he thought with no moon, in the near pitch dark of starlight, there might be possibilities. He had no plan, but it would be dark soon. And just then, as he settled back to wait and think, way to get the captives without being discovered, the whole world blew up. Warfare. The British procedure when fighting was to march at the foe in a close line with 2 or 3 ranks of men. The front rank would fire at 50 or 60 yards, then drop back and reload while the second rank stepped forward, fired, dropping back and reloading. This back rank came forward and fired. This rolling volley had the effect of creating a kind of mass firepower. The weapons were very simple, but it was almost impossible to stand against the line when the men grew close, quit firing altogether and charged screaming. It took a special kind of courage to stand ready when a line of howling men ran at you with bayonets aimed at your stomach. Many times American soldiers turned and ran rather than face what the British Army called the wall of British steel. That was chapter 7 of Woods Runner by Gary Paulsen. If you want to finish this book, go to our YouTube channel and look for the playlist Woods Runner by Gary Paulsen. I'll see you in chapter